What is up, you guys? Welcome back to another edition of the podcast. My name is Ramon, and this is Dad's podcast project. And today I'm going to take a little bit of a turn in some of the day-to-day talks that we've been having recently about some positive things in our children's lives and touch on one of the subjects that actually not only has an adverse effect if action isn't taken, it will affect our children, as well as the decisions that we made as parents for our children and in regards to vaccinating our kids. So that is what we're going to be talking about today. Make no misinterpretation of it. I am pro-vaccination. If you are anti-vaccination, this is probably not the video for you. If you are in the gray on either way, then I'd recommend you stick around because everything is about educating yourself, whether you are for it, against it, on the fence about it. Continue to educate yourself on these topics. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. So I recently came across a video by Kirkskazad. It's called In a Nutshell, their YouTube channel. And they were talking about the measles outbreak that has been going around, and it's been in the news. I've seen widespread, I don't really want to use the word pandemic when it comes to measles, but it is something that was almost non-existent, if not completely eradicated a few years back. And because of this subtle swell with the population in spreading information about vaccinations and being in relation or causing autism as a side effect, there were a lot of parents who became anti-vaxxers. They're not for vaccinating their children. And now this is a question that my wife and I had to sit and ponder when our son was born, because we sort of had the same kind of uneducated point of view about it. Like, well, I don't know if he should be vaccinated. I don't remember, or I can't ask my parents if I was vaccinated. And we tend to look back. It's not the best to do, but I looked back and said to myself, well, I don't get sick very often. I probably get sick once a year. So maybe our kids will be okay. But I wasn't okay with just throwing out like a winging it answer. So I did a little bit of research. My wife looked into things, and come to find out, it is very important to get your children vaccinated. It's something that I should have educated myself on earlier. And believe me, I looked into the pros and the cons. And to be quite frank, the pros greatly outweigh the cons. From one of the major points of view that it seems social media has, and a lot of people out there, new parents have, is the side effect being autism. And this was a study that came out. I cannot remember the gentleman's name who sort of wrote this paper about it, but it's been widely discredited by a huge population of the medical community. And so when you have the medical professionals out there who are disputing your claims and calling it a farce, then it's a farce. However, it touches on something very human within each of us, the feeling. You have a faith in regards to a negative reaction using a product produced by science and medicine. And so you look at things, and a lot of the claims are either the government is tampering with things in order to population control, whatever, or it's just a man-made thing and we should go the natural route, or it's faith-based with your religion. I think that I can't remember the branch of the Jewish community and some other religious communities that don't believe in vaccinations, and they claim it's because of their religion that they're not going to be vaccinated. And Before it used to be such a small community of people, but with social media, this false information just spreads on such a wide scale that unfortunately not enough people get vaccinated. So Kirk's Kazad, their video about vaccination, threw out some numbers that I thought were really interesting. And they took like a pool, like a sample pool of people who would be unvaccinated. And I believe that the number that they used was, scrolling through their source material here, but of 10 million kids. So they said of 10 million kids who were not vaccinated, if all 10 million didn't get the measles vaccination, about 800,000 of them, or 8%, would suffer from dangerous diarrhea. About 700,000, or 7%, would suffer from an ear infection. About 600,000, or 6%, would suffer from pneumonia. Up to 10,000, or 0.1%, will get encephalitis. And about 2,500, or 0.025%, will contract SSPE, which is subacute sclerosing penecephallitis. So it is a disease that is a creeping one. After a measles infection, it lingers in the brain and breaks out months or years after the infection. It slowly destroys the patient's brain. First signs are forgetfulness, problems with sleeping, and hallucination. Later in the process, more and more cognitive abilities like moving and speaking are impaired. All patients die from the disease. And I'll leave a link in the show notes of all of the material that I'm speaking on, but taken together, it is estimated that 20,000 children out of that 10 million will be killed by measles. And so that was what people were dealing with back in the day. There's also a quote here saying measles was the most lethal infectious agent before the licensure in 1963 and subsequent widespread use of live attenuated measles vaccine. In the early 1960s, as many as 135 million cases of measles and over 6 million measles-related deaths are estimated to have occurred yearly. That is 6 million people who would die every year. Estimated, of course, but still, even if that's plus or minus a million, that's a lot of people who are dying from a measles-related death. And it was after... said it was that after the measles vaccination was in development in most developing countries during the 1980s as a part of the expanded program on immunization that had a major effort on global measles mortality. By 1987, WHO, I'm not sure what that acronym stands for, estimated that the number of deaths from measles worldwide had been reduced to 1.9 million. Unless that's 19. I'll link it. You can you can make your assessment. Well, not 19, 1.9 million. That is a dramatic change. That is wildly different. And the other thing, if people didn't get vaccinated, 98% of them would suffer from high fever and a very unpleasant rash. I mean, this was a pretty widespread thing. And I think that the other reason why a lot of parents don't want to partake in possibly vaccinating their children is that they've not grown up in a world where the measles existed at the level that it did back in the 60s up until the 80s. I was born in 83. So apparently they had already won that battle. They had already won that war. And I was living in a world where the measles was an afterthought. It was only my parents and my grandparents that could possibly remember a time where measles was rampant. So they also provide some studies or some source material on what the MMR vaccination would do if 10 million kids were vaccinated. So the MMR is a combination vaccine which includes the needed serum against measles, mumps, and rubella. Over time, we developed combination vaccines to reduce the times we need to put a needle in our skin. So, which is probably where you hear a lot of these terms on social media about these cocktails of immunizations, of vaccinations that kids are getting, and just pumping them full of chemicals and just really harsh descriptions of a vaccine. So out of 10 million vaccinated kids, around 10% would get a fever. That's a pretty small amount from the almost 90, what was it? From the almost 98%. I mean, just that right there. You're already taking a huge jump in seeing the benefits of it. About 500,000 or 5% would get a mild rash. Remember before, the study showed that 98% would get fever and a mild rash. Now with the vaccine, we're down to 5% getting a mild rash, 10% getting a fever. Up to 100, that is 100 children, or 0.001%, might have a serious reaction, allergic reaction, and will have to be treated. So observation rate of vaccine reactions, measles, mumps, rubella, and vaccines, study done in 2014. There's also a link in this dossier of source material. Up to 10 boys, or 0.0001, might get an inflammation of the genitalia. And up to 10 kids, or 0.0001%, might get the most serious side effects, encephalitis. They said that they talked to different experts and tried to identify such cases in literature, and they only found single case reports. So this is a conservative estimate, and they go more into detail below the source for documented cases. And so just that alone, vaccinating versus non-vaccination, if you are on the fence about it and you just look at it numbers wise, if you don't vaccinate, you're guaranteed to go through all of those risks. You have a 98% chance of going through the rash and the fever phase. The measles last for 2 weeks, at least documented, or per how the disease runs its course. So 2 weeks of rash and fever that you'll be out of commission, and it is highly contagious. Just being around someone who has the measles, you will get it. So they leave a comment here that in 2019, it isn't it, but in 2019, is it fair to say that vaccines don't cause autism? So we've had years of study now, and their comment is one of the most controversial topics around vaccines is the claim that they may cause autism. This is such a large field that it would merit a video of its own, but a lot of people have already discussed this topic in detail and explained it very well. But here's a short overview that they're providing. The most prominent reason for the autism claim is a study of Wakefield. I don't know what his first name is. Adam. We'll just say Adam. From 1998, who claimed that the MMR vaccine that time caused autism, or the MMR vaccine that time caused autism. But later, his methods and results were debunked as false, and the fact that he filed a petition for his own vaccine did lead to the end of his credibility. Other studies took care to the topic and did not find any relations between the vaccine and autism. So that's something that I actually didn't know, that this person who wrote or made a claim that the MMR vaccine caused autism was later coming out for a patent on his own vaccine. It just seems like you have like not the best intent when you're doing something like that. If you're trying to come out with your own vaccine that, quite frankly, would make you an overnight millionaire, clearly you would want to debunk the whatever's hot on the streets at the time. So they do provide a couple links on whether or not it does cause autism. They said that they couldn't find enough evidence of it. A lot of it was hearsay, or there weren't any real documentations linking the two in their research. Again, I'll provide a link to this dossier. They provide a wealth of links, and they said that they could only come up with a tiny handful of documented deaths after vaccination. They said that for our research, we tried to verify reports on death cases caused by the MMR vaccine. And while they found sources of encephalitis, they could not identify anaphylaxis cases. I don't even know what that word means. I'd have to look that one up. We ended up with between 1 and 9 potential death cases. But what we found does not allow us to give you a number like X people died from vaccines. We will explain why in the following documents step by step. So they explain a little bit later in this why they can't quite pinpoint a number for you as to why they can't give you a number on the vaccine deaths or vaccine related deaths. So it was doing research like this. At the time when my son was born, this video hadn't come out. So I was looking at different documents. I was Googling what I could and what information was out there. Because again, you can't just take, at least it's not my approach to just take the first link that I see on a Google search at face value. I have to compare a wealth of information, read up on the pros, find the cons. If I can't find any pros, find the pros, and try to make the best educated decision that I can. Again, I couldn't ask my parents whether or not I was vaccinated. I don't have that information. Maybe I could have found that too, but I found it was much easier to search for research done by professionals and not follow or not listen to the static that is out there on social media. It's very easy for someone to just copy and paste a link on their Facebook because it's what they feel, but without doing any real research on the subject, they're spreading misinformation. And unfortunately, a lot of people out there are not going to take the time, or they don't have the time to do the research themselves. They're just going to take even the header or the title of that story that you're providing, and they're going to take that at face value. That's very, very dangerous, especially when it comes to your children. Now, the thing that makes me, or the reason with why I'm speaking about this on my podcast is not only to try to spread some of the information that I have gathered and to educate those who may not be informed, as well as provide a link again in the show notes, in the description of the video, because this will be on YouTube as well as on the podcast on iTunes and wherever you guys listen to podcasts. Humble plug. But I think that we have to educate ourselves. We have to not just speak with what we feel, but provide information that backs it up. Because unfortunately, when it comes to things like the measles vaccine, there has to be, I think that the term is like a herd, a herd of people, pretty much. X percent of people, I think it's like 90 or 85% of your community has to be vaccinated in order to cover for the rest who either can't or don't want to. So you can climb to the highest hilltop and scream to the heavens that you are an anti-vaxxer, you don't believe in vaccinations. It is because of those 85 or 90% of your local population. They're the ones who are covering you. But when that misinformation is spread, and now you're in 75%, 70% of your community, it doesn't matter anymore. Now it's going to spread. Now other people are susceptible to it. You don't have this blanket of protection by those who either believe in it, educated themselves about it, or for whatever reason decide to get vaccinated and get their children vaccinated. When a lot of these posts were going out there on social media, my son, I had taken him in to get the flu shot. I don't get the flu. I get sick once a year. And my wife was asking me, "Are you going to get it?" And it's like, I didn't really think to, but she reminded me that if our son gets it, you ought to get it too. So I did. And I was thinking jokingly to myself, like, here we are, we're doing this together. It's not just him. I have to lead by example. So I know that in a lot of my videos I speak on, and a lot of my episodes I speak on whatever you decide to do as a parent for your children, that you have to make the best decisions for them. And that I can't tell you how to parent, that you just got to do you. But when it comes to vaccinations, I'm sorry that here is where I put my foot down. That your decisions, they don't just affect your children. They don't just affect you. They affect your community. They affect my kids. They affect other people's children who are vaccinated. And when schools start banning children from attending because they're not vaccinated, and this anti-vaccination group feels discriminated against, I'm sorry. Unfortunately, there's scientific studies that prove that your kids, unfortunately, are the hosts for a very big problem. And the cycle time of the cycle time of the disease is 2 weeks. So you just got to stay home. Maybe that's just a small price to pay. I feel that way off topic. I feel that way at work when someone decides that they want to come in sick and not use a sick day. I'm not going to name any names because maybe they're listening to this episode, but this can happen at any job, really. And I never felt two ways about it until I became a parent, because my kids, they don't have PTO. They don't have sick days. I'm their provider. If they're sick, I need to stay home. I need to take time off work. If they need to go to see the doctor, I need to take them. And when someone comes in and spreads a sickness or a disease because they don't want to take the time off, I may be able to combat whatever it is that they're bringing in. Slam some orange juice, eat a couple soups, and I'm good to go. But my kids, if I bring that home to them, they're the ones that have to ride it out. And I understand, yeah, we have to build our immune system, this, that, and the other. But when it comes to something like measles, I don't want to bring that home. I don't want my kids to have to go through that. Now, they have been vaccinated. I have to do a little bit more research on whether or not being vaccinated does make you immune to the measles, or like I have to look into it a little bit further myself. But it is a little bit off topic, the whole conversation about vaccines. I feel that it's important. I couldn't ask my parents whether or not I was. This podcast serves as a means to tell my children why I decided to get them vaccinated, as well as a proclamation that, yes, they in fact have been vaccinated. And these are the reasons why. This is the research that myself and my wife had done in order before we went ahead with the decision. So, with that being said, I'm going to end it there because now it's getting a little ranty. So, I want to thank you guys if you made it to the end of this podcast. I want to thank you guys for your continued support. Leave me a comment in the comment section down below. Are you pro? Are you anti when it comes to vaccinations? What were the things that led you to making the decision to vaccinate or not to vaccinate? If you don't vaccinate and you believe, if you're just an anti-vaxxer, but you somehow made it to the end of this video, please click the link that I provide down below. Educate yourself. There's more than one side of the story. And from the research that I've done, there's overwhelming evidence leading to make the decision to vaccinating your children an easy one, in my opinion. So with that being said, I want to thank you guys again. And as always, till next time, see ya.